The forbidden legacy. You don't ban a species from war because they're weak. You ban them because you remember what they did. War, they said, was supposed to be clean. That's what the Galactic Accord had promised when it exiled humanity from frontline combat 2 centuries ago. No more blood, no more screams, no more savagery. War had been sanitized, executed through drones, artificial intelligence, and cold, calculated suppression. Tactical engagements were simulated and settled like corporate disputes, not fought in trenches or in orbit. War was data now, sterile, predictable, and in their comfort, they forgot. They forgot Erebus, a name erased from official records, unspoken in polite society, but whispered in the darker corners of alien diplomacy like a curse that refused to die. Erebus hadn't been a war, it had been a warning. The last time humanity was allowed to fight, they'd turned the skies of Planet Break into radioactive hellfire. Oceans boiled, cities disintegrated, 3 entire species were wiped out in less than a week. Since then, no one had dared to summon humans back to the battlefield. Until now, the Repari cruiser trembled as encrypted transmissions lit up the galactic comm channels. A neutral diplomatic hub, the Triricore Peace Nexus, was gone. Not damaged, not compromised, vaporized. 16 species lost their ambassadors. 2 moons had been reduced to ash. The perpetrators, the Zarn Dominion, an aggressive insectoid empire with carapace armor and an endless appetite for expansion. Panic rippled through the Galactic Accord. The Council convened an emergency session, but instead of retaliation, there was debate. Endless debate. Rules, protocols, morality clauses. While they argued over subparagraphs and ethical precedents, the Zarn seized 3 more star systems. And then, without a vote, without ceremony, a message was sent to Earth. Limited human deployment authorized. 1 battalion, no civilians, containment mission only. That was the official statement. But everyone knew what it really meant. Desperation. Captain Silas Ren stood silently at the edge of the drop bay, his armor weighing down on his shoulders like the judgment of history. It had been decades since he last wore it, since Earth had signed the Passive Participation Pact, agreeing to train, advise, and manufacture weapons, but never to fight. Not anymore. Behind him stood 10 soldiers, the last of the Earthborn. Trained in the old ways, war for them was not theory, it was instinct. And though most hadn't seen real combat in years, none had forgotten it. Because war never really leaves the blood, it just sleeps. Ren, came a voice over comms. Drex, a Reptary diplomat who once spat at the sight of humans. Now he was begging. We've lost orbital control. Their cruisers took out our defense grid. If we don't break the landing zone in 6 hours, Delve Prime is lost. Ren tapped the side of his helmet. Understood, we're en route. No reassurance, no comforting lies, just facts. That was the human way. Outside the drop bay, Delve Prime burned. Ash and plasma fire streaked the sky. The landscape below was a wasteland of slagged earth, burning wreckage, and collapsed fortifications. Movement in the valleys, Zarn units, bristling with heat rifles, crawling like armored ants across the corpses of their enemies. Inside the ship, the pilot's voice crackled. Drop zone clear in 5. Ren turned to his squad, faces hidden behind helmets, bodies tensed like blades. No prisoners, he said, no broadcasts, no survivors. Make them remember why they banned us. And then the floor opened. The Earthborn dropped like meteors. Summoning the ghosts. The drop was silent. No rallying cry, no war drums, only the hiss of oxygen vents and the mechanical clatter of boots locking into descent pods. 10 human soldiers, sealed in armor built for extinction-level events, plummeted from orbit like silent vengeance. Captain Silas Ren barely felt the jolt as his boots slammed into the charred soil of Delve Prime. Smoke choked the sky. The horizon boiled in streaks of red and black. He took a breath through his filter, not because he needed to, but because it helped him feel the air of war again. Acidic, dirty, real. Behind him, his battalion landed in perfect synchrony. No fanfare, no celebration, just grim focus and the low clicks of weapons calibrating. The battlefield stretched before them, a graveyard of broken vessels, twisted steel, and Zarn scouts picking over the wreckage. The insectoid creatures twitched as they noticed movement, but by then it was already too late. The first kill was clean. A tungsten blade shaped like a shard of winter cleaved the Zarn warrior in 2. No scream, no resistance, just a mess of blood and shattered chitin. The second one died with a sonic burst to the chest, liquefied from the inside out. Then the others started running. Too late. The humans advanced without a word. No comms chatter, no shouted orders. Each soldier moved like a memory of death, efficient, fluid, absolute. Every round fired was measured, deliberate. Every kill was a message, and each message said the same thing. You were warned. High above, in the orbiting warships of the Repari Alliance, silence fell upon command decks as the live combat feed played out. Ambassadors from half a dozen species stared in quiet horror. No one spoke. Until one voice broke through, Admiral Sheetarn of the Karothi, her voice low and cold. They don't hesitate, they don't retreat, they don't care. Ambassador Drex swallowed hard, his throat dry. He'd been the one who helped draft the containment terms. Limited deployment, they said. Strategic advisors only. Minimal aggression. But what he was watching wasn't minimal. It was clinical carnage. Tactical obliteration. It was human. On the ground, Ren stood amid the smoldering ruins of what used to be a forward Zarn outpost. His HUD displayed a full squad wipe. No casualties on their side, no survivors on theirs. Zone secure, he said flatly, without looking back. Sergeant Marlowe, dragging a bloodied plasma rifle through the dirt, chuckled grimly. We've been grounded too damn long. No one responded. They didn't need to. Every soldier there felt it, the thrum in their veins, the dull roar behind their eyes, not anger, not vengeance. Something colder. It wasn't taught, it was remembered. Private Kira stood apart from the group, her armor still unscuffed, her hands trembling slightly. This was her first real deployment. She had trained in simulations. She had scored high in tactics and reflex, but nothing prepared her for this. Not the blood, not the screaming, not the calm on her captain's face as he ordered a no-survivor sweep. She turned toward Ren as he knelt beside a dying Zarn. The alien's mandibles twitched, its internal fluids spilling out in sickly green pulses. It tried to speak, tried to beg. Ren didn't blink. He simply leaned down and whispered, "Now you remember why they banned us." Then he pulled the trigger. The headless corpse slumped into the ash. Back in orbit, the diplomats raged. Rules were quoted, accords were cited, demands for accountability echoed through every encrypted channel. Earth's envoy, our envoy, seated in full uniform aboard the Eternal Consensus, responded only once. They volunteered. "That's a technicality," roared the Veladin ambassador. "No," said the human envoy, voice steady. "That's humanity." A silence followed, not of agreement, but of realization. You didn't ask humans to fight because you needed peace. You asked them because you needed the monsters you pretended didn't exist. And now the monsters had remembered how to hunt. The second wave of Zarn troops came harder. Dropships screamed across the atmosphere, deploying hundreds of fresh units with heat rifles and exo armor. The valley erupted in plasma fire. The humans didn't fall back. They advanced. Ren's voice cracked across the squad comms. "Shield line, V formation, funnel them." It was an ancient tactic. Third World Wars, Terran era. Funnel the enemy into a narrow canyon, trap them, bleed them. The mines Ren had planted 2 hours earlier detonated with surgical timing. Flame, screams, shattered armor. Black blood sprayed the cliffs like war paint. Private Kira, now kneeling behind cover, took 2 clean shots. Double kill. She didn't shake this time. "They just keep coming," she muttered. "They'll stop," said Corporal Rios, "once they understand what we are." And somewhere above them, the stars watched in silence. Because the battlefield never forgot, and neither did the humans. The first battle. Delve Prime was supposed to be a warning shot, a message, not a massacre. At least that was what the Accord had told themselves when they authorized the limited deployment of Earth's Last Battalion. But war doesn't listen to intentions, and humans, true humans, the kind trained before peace became policy, don't play by the rules once the gates open. Captain Silas Ren didn't issue another order. He didn't need to. The Zarn had sent a battalion to reclaim the valley. They brought artillery crawlers, heavy air support, and infantry formations in numbers that made the ground tremble. The humans brought silence. No cries, no chants, no fanfare, just movement, just execution. Ren signaled once, 2 fingers up, 1 across, and the formation shifted. Like clockwork, like ghosts. Half the squad vanished into the shattered buildings that lined the valley's edge. The other half hunkered into defensive positions, seemingly exposed but bait by design. The Zarn advanced with the arrogance of numbers. They fired indiscriminately, plasma bolts lighting the field like a storm. Stone shattered, metal melted. The valley screamed, but the humans were gone before the beams landed. They struck from the shadows. They used the wreckage as traps. A fallen shuttle housed a nest of proximity mines. A collapsed antenna tower, rigged with seismic charges, detonated under the weight of a Zarn artillery unit. Soldiers were vaporized mid-step. Above, drones sent by the Ripari tried to provide overwatch, but even they couldn't track the humans. Their signals were jammed, or worse, redirected, blinding their own support teams. It wasn't just war, it was art. Ren moved like a phantom across the battlefield. He cut down enemies with brutal efficiency, never wasting a strike. His HUD lit up with kill confirmations, but his eyes didn't flicker. War didn't excite him, it focused him. Marlowe, grunting with exertion, tore a mounted gun from a burning Zarn crawler and used it to turn an entire advancing platoon into ash. The recoil shattered the servos in his prosthetic arm, but he didn't stop until the barrel melted red. Kira, her breath sharp and shallow, took cover behind a fallen wall, her face streaked with ash and sweat. She had killed before, simulated, scored, optimized, but this was different. The smell, the heat, the sounds, and the silence between them. She shot a Zarn at close range, its eyes wide, its weapon half raised, and watched as its twitching limbs collapsed. She didn't blink. She didn't look away. She just reloaded. First contact complete, Ren's voice said in her comms. Fall back to second choke. That was the only order. The team moved as one, even with blood on their boots and smoke in their lungs. The second wave of Zarn forces surged in, angrier now, less disciplined. They charged into the kill zone with desperation, blinded by pride and the illusion of superiority. They didn't see the traps, not until it was too late. Plasma mines lit the canyon like a solar flare. Bodies flew, screams echoed. A Zarn commander, ranked by his glowing thorax plating, survived the blast only to be bisected by Rios with a combat cleaver forged from depleted uranium. The humans didn't cheer, they advanced. The Accord's command center, orbiting far above in the artificial calm of vacuum, stared at the tactical feed in disbelief. The battlefield read like a murder scene, not a skirmish. No defensive posture, no attempts at capture or negotiation. Just erasure. This isn't containment, Ambassador Drex whispered. No, replied Admiral Sheetarn grimly. This is memory, old memory. They remembered the Erebus campaign, the one they buried, redacted, sealed behind levels of clearance so high only myths remained. But now those myths were walking again, bleeding again, teaching again. And the lesson was simple. Never wake the dead. The battle ended with no formal signal. It just stopped. The Zarn retreated, not tactically, they fled. The few who survived left their weapons behind. Many discarded their armor mid-run, as if it would help them move faster, or if shedding it would somehow erase what they had seen. The valley quieted, but it wasn't peace, it was fear. The kind that seeps into the soil and refuses to leave. Ren stood at the northern ridge, watching the horizon. Below, the battlefield smoldered, a grave of steel and flesh, black blood and shattered ambition. The stars above shimmered through the haze, indifferent and ancient. Kira stepped beside him, her rifle slung low, her eyes sunken. They'll come back, she said. Let them, Ren replied, unmoved. We're just getting started. The memory of Erebus. The flames had died, but the air still trembled. Delve Prime's atmosphere hung thick with ash and ions. In the valley below, the wreckage of the first battle was already cooling, charred metal bones jutting from the ground like the ribs of some great beast left to rot. The humans didn't celebrate. They didn't even speak. They remembered. Inside a makeshift command shelter fashioned from the gutted remains of a Zarn crawler, the Last Battalion rearmed in silence. Every movement was muscle memory. Every breath was calibrated. None of them asked what came next. They already knew. Private Kira sat apart from the others, her rifle in her lap, her eyes locked on nothing in particular. Her hands shook, not from fear, but from something older, deeper. Confusion, shame, awe. She had killed more enemies in a single day than most interstellar troops did in a career. The footage from her visor cam was already flagged by AI analysts for potential war crimes. She hadn't even noticed. Sergeant Marlowe, one arm gone, now fitted with a temporary carbon frame, limped over and sat beside her. He offered no comfort, no words. He didn't need to. I thought I was ready, Kira whispered. You are, Marlowe grunted. Then why does it feel like something's broken? Marlowe didn't answer. He just stared out through the cracked viewport at the red sky beyond. Captain Ren stood at the center of the room, hunched over a flickering holomap. Zones marked red pulsed across the terrain. He wasn't just planning. He was remembering. The door slid open with a hiss. Kira stepped inside, her posture straight despite the tremble in her limbs. Her voice was quiet. Sir, may I ask something? Ren didn't look up. Ask? Why were we really banned from the battlefield? A long pause, then he looked at her. Not as a superior officer, but as a relic unearthing itself. Because we did what they couldn't forget. He tapped a code into the console. The holomap shifted, giving way to a grainy projection. A recording long since buried by Accord protocol. A tag at the bottom read, Erebus Campaign, Level Omega Clearance. The footage began. Gray skies over alien cities. Earthborne drop pods raining from the stratosphere like steel rain. Orbital strikes, not on military targets, but on cities. Precision nuclear payloads deployed on population centers. Then came the drone swarms, designed not to disable, but to strip. Flesh, bone, metal, gone in minutes. Clean, efficient, genocidal. And finally the screams. Not warriors. Children. Entire planets turned to cemeteries. This is what got us banned, Ren said flatly. Kira didn't move. She didn't blink. The color drained from her face. We did that? We won, Ren replied. Not proudly, not bitterly. Just truth. They say it was rage, he continued. A mistake, an overreaction. He leaned closer to the screen, watching a flash of light consume a school tower. But they're wrong. It wasn't rage, it was clarity. Above Delve Prime, panic bloomed like wildfire. The footage from the battle was circulating faster than any censoring protocol could keep up. The Repari flagship's command deck had devolved into shouting matches and silent terror. Diplomats clashed over regulations, ethics, damage control. None of it mattered. Because in every shadowed corridor and secure channel, one question had begun to echo. What if they don't stop this time? On the diplomatic moon of Karshi, a crisis session had already begun. Holograms of destroyed outposts played in loops. Audio logs of Zarn units begging for reinforcements were replayed again and again. Minister Yava of the Lortec stood trembling, eyes wide. They lied to us, she hissed. They promised us restraint. Drex, pale and exhausted, shook his head slowly. They were restrained, he said. You don't know what they could have done. Shern, a grizzled admiral of the Kurlathi, slammed his fist on the table. We should have finished Earth when we had the chance. The Earth envoy didn't flinch. You tried, he said coldly. Now you remember why that was your last mistake. Back on Delve Prime, the sun began to set behind a blood-colored sky. Ren stood on a rocky outcrop, his visor deactivated, his expression unreadable. Below, the ground was quiet. The enemy had withdrawn, regrouping, no doubt planning something massive. Kira approached quietly. They're coming back, in force. Ren nodded. Good. You're hoping for it? He turned to her, eyes calm. I'm counting on it. Why? Because they still think this is about winning. He gestured toward the horizon where smog and silence blurred the lines between land and sky. It's not. Then what is it about? He looked at her, not with pity, not with anger, but with legacy. It's about making sure they never forget us again. Operation Black Dusk. The operation had a name. Black Dusk. 80 warships, 600,000 troops, biomech warforms, neuroswarmers, planetary disruptors, every horror the Galactic Accord had ever authorized but never dared use. It was the largest multilateral strike force assembled in over a century. Its objective? Erase the humans. The War Council aboard the Zarn Dreadnought, Unmaker's Will, vibrated with tension. Commanders from 7 species clustered around pulsing maps and data feeds. Human signatures blinked in red. Dots. Just dots. Too few to be real. General Cathar, his armored mandibles twitching, slammed a claw onto the map. They are outnumbered. Their supply lines are severed. Reinforcements have stalled. We strike now and we end them. Silence. Then a whisper from the Kurlathi elder, voice dry as bone. They won't fight to win. Of course they will, Keithir snapped. No, the elder said. They'll fight to make us regret we ever stood on the same ground. On Delve Prime, the sky changed. It wasn't a storm. It was an invasion. The clouds parted for drop pods screaming through the atmosphere. Elite Zarn death squads, hired mercenaries, Crayorn berserkers, slavers with plasma chains, mutants grown in vats, all descending at once. Captain Silas Ren stood atop a ridge, watching the sky burn with enemy fire. "They're coming hard," Marlowe said beside him, wiping soot from his brow. His prosthetic arm sparked, already cracked from overuse. Kira crouched nearby, adjusting the straps on her armor. Her eyes stayed on the sky. "You knew this was coming, didn't you?" Rena nodded. "I was counting on it." "On being surrounded?" "No," he said. "On them being stupid enough to think it matters." The humans had vanished. 2 days before the enemy arrived, they melted into the terrain. They weren't waiting for the storm. They were preparing it. They rigged the riverbeds with seismic charges. They mapped the cliffs for collapse. They wired the canyons with heat-triggered mines. They turned Delve Prime into a weapon, not a battlefield. The first wave touched down and exploded. Their own landing zone had been rigged with plasma traps. Screaming Zarn troops were blown apart before they even drew weapons. Panic erupted instantly. Command tried to re-establish order, barking commands across scrambled channels. And then a voice hijacked every comm frequency, every HUD, every open feed across the battlefield. Silas Ren's voice. "You should have left us in peace." And then hell opened. The humans struck from shadows. They used old paths, collapsed tunnels, ancient wreckage. They appeared and vanished like myths, like nightmares. Crayorn berserkers were lured into tunnel systems, then incinerated with flamethrowers through air ducts. Orbital ships tried to provide cover fire, only to hit their own troops, redirected by spoofed signals the humans had planted hours earlier. Zarn commanders screamed. Some tried to retreat, others tried to dig in. Neither mattered. By the end of the first day, 30% of the strike force was gone. By the second, half had vanished from sensors. By the third, no one was answering calls anymore. Inside the twisted wreckage of a collapsed crawler, Marlowe leaned against a wall, blood soaking his vest. His artificial arms sparked, nearly dead. "You know what this feels like?" he wheezed. Kira collapsed beside him, her face scorched and split, one cheek blistered and raw. "Don't say it. Erebus," he said. "This is Erebus all over again." Nearby, Ren sat in the shadows, hands covered in black blood, his eyes hollow. "No," he said. "Erebus was rage." He looked out through the jagged window where bodies burned in the distance. "This is clarity." Across the galaxy, things fell apart. Neutral planets declared immediate neutrality. Mercenary guilds disbanded. Pirate fleets abandoned their contracts. Even Zarn defectors began asking for protection from Earth's wrath. Because it wasn't just a war anymore. It was a message, and it was burning itself into the stars. 2 solar cycles after Operation Black Dusk collapsed, the Galactic Accord issued a universal emergency alert. Human military units no longer recognize command protocols. Do not engage. Do not approach. This is not a containment scenario. This is a priority red-level anomaly. It wasn't an order. It was a warning. Silas Ren stood in the ruins of the Zarn's once mighty fortress, the enemy's banners lying in the dirt like discarded lies. Only a few humans remained now. Marlowe was gone, blown up to collapse a canyon on a Zarn convoy. Rios never made it out of the last blitz. Kira's armor was cracked, her ribs wrapped in synth fiber, her rifle always clean, even as her eyes grew darker each day. "No reinforcement," she said one night as smoke rose in the distance. "Command's not even answering." Ren didn't look at her. "They're not going to." "You think they abandoned us?" "No," he said coldly. "They lost control of us." He was right. Back on Earth, chaos simmered under silence. Global media blackout, protests in the streets, governments screaming behind closed doors. Every diplomat demanded the same thing. Why aren't they coming home? But the real question was the one no one wanted to say out loud. What if they don't want to? Far across the galaxy, in the think tank of Kyarzix's asteroid belt, 12 terrified species sat in desperation. "We've lost 5 sectors," a Vorthian analyst whispered. "We estimate less than 60 human soldiers remain." "And we've lost over 200,000, someone added. Drex stared at the display of red blips blinking out one by one. "They're not soldiers," he said. "There's something we tried to bury and forgot to fear." General Carr slammed his fist on the table. "Nuke the planet, glass the soil, erase the problem." "And what do we do when Earth responds?" someone asked. Carr hesitated. "We hope they don't." Drex didn't blink. "You don't get it. They're not fighting for Earth anymore." "Then what are they fighting for?" someone asked. Drex leaned forward, voice a whisper now. "Vengeance." no longer fighting for Earth. Delph Prime no longer looked like a battlefield. It looked like a warning. The continents once lush and green were now blackened husks, scarred by failed orbital strikes and cratered by centuries of retribution packed into days. Oceans had boiled dry. Cities no longer stood. They were smudges, suggestions of what had once been civilization. From orbit, the planet resembled a claw mark dragged across a living world. And yet, the humans remained. They didn't advance. They didn't withdraw. They existed, quiet, coiled, and still. Their presence alone was now an act of war. Aboard the Accord Citadel, deep in the Lambda sector, an emergency summit convened in full panic. No introductions, no pleasantries, just numbers. Delph Prime is dead, whispered a Yulon official. Over 250,000 dead. 46 billion credits in infrastructure, lost. To stop 60 humans. 52, someone corrected. We confirmed another 8 dead last rotation. Does it matter? Drex snapped. His bloodshot eyes scanned the room, voice fraying with the weight of terror. They're not a squad anymore. They're an infection. Admiral Sheetarn, who once mocked Earth's old warriors, stood pale, trembling. If this spreads, we won't be able to contain it. Not militarily, not politically, not morally. A hush fell. Then came the whisper from the Ark Ambassador, cold and final. So we bury it. The plan was simple, brutal. Deploy the Grav Lance, an experimental weapon capable of collapsing a planet's gravity core from within. No fire, no fallout, just silence, a clean erasure, a tragedy. The official report would call it a core destabilization accident, but the intent was clear. Kill every last human on Delph Prime. Ren had intercepted the transmission hours before. Inside the ruins of the Zarn stronghold, only a handful of his squad remained. No medics, no backup, just blood, pain, and memory. Kira sat nearby, one leg wrapped in synth fiber, her face gaunt and hollow. She watched Ren as he stared into the dust-streaked distance. "We've already won," she said weakly. "Let them do it. Let them bury this place. It's what they've always wanted." Ren didn't move. "We don't die quietly." He knelt and pulled something from the dirt, an old Earth transmitter, battered and ancient, a relic from a time before peace treaties and diplomatic masks. He clicked it on. "This is Captain Silas Ren of Earth's Last Battalion. You think you can erase us? You think silence will make us vanish?" His voice was calm, unshaken. "But here's the thing about humans. We never disappear quietly. We become stories. We become nightmares." He looked up at the crimson sky, eyes burning. "Go ahead. Kill us. But understand this. Your children will wake screaming our names, and their children will curse the day you forgot what we are." He dropped the transmitter into the ash. No one stopped him. No one could. Hours later, the Grav Lance fired. A pillar of white light erupted from the sky. The core cracked. The ground screamed. Mountains folded inward. Oceans vanished into rifts of collapsing matter. The planet died, not with fire, but with a whisper. And for a moment it worked. Delph Prime was gone. No debris, no survivors, no evidence. Just silence. The galaxy exhaled. But then the signal arrived. A primitive Earth-style radio ping, static at first. It bounced between relay stations, reactivated abandoned satellites, echoed across forgotten probes. Then Ren's voice returned. "You can bury a battlefield, but not the memory of what it cost you. We are the species you banned because you feared what we could do. And now you remember." That wasn't the only message. Across 12 systems, variations began surfacing. Same voice, same cadence, different words, different warnings. Smugglers abandoned entire sectors. Pirate fleets surrendered without contact. Military convoys rerouted entire operations to avoid flagged human zones, most of which no longer contained any living humans at all. Because the humans had become something worse than soldiers. They had become legend. Back on Earth, chaos churned behind sealed doors. The Global Defense Council couldn't agree on anything, except for one truth. They hadn't lost control of their soldiers. The soldiers had left Earth behind. Some said Silas Ren died on Delph Prime, buried in the implosion. Others whispered that he escaped through a forgotten orbital launcher, now living in the void, watching the stars he once burned. Kira, she became a ghost story. Children of the Max colonies spoke of a woman who wandered battlefields alone, etching ancient Earth symbols into shattered stone, the old sigil for home. The galaxy didn't understand it, but it feared it 50 years later, a cargo ship crashed on the edge of a dead system near the Delve Prime wreck line. The rescue crew found only one survivor, drenched in blood, not his own, eyes wide, unblinking. He whispered the same words again and again. "They're still out there, waiting." The final voice. Bavinkas. The Gravlance worked perfectly. Too perfectly. No scorched atmosphere, no broken satellites, no drifting debris fields. Delve Prime was gone, folded into itself, a perfect implosion of silence. To the public, it was ruled a core destabilization incident. To the Accord diplomats, it was a tragedy of prolonged warfare. To the soldiers who watched it happen from orbit, it was something else entirely. A mass murder, and then a mistake. Because silence doesn't bury ghosts. It only gives them room to echo louder. On a desolate listening post on the edge of Carthan space, a lone technician stared at her console. She tapped the screen. Once, twice. "Commander," she whispered. "You need to see this." A soft ping, then static, old Earth style, ancient transmission tech that shouldn't have worked, shouldn't even exist. But beneath the noise, a voice, Ren's voice. You can bury a battlefield, but not the memory of what it cost you. The static cleared completely. Then the final words came. "We are the species you banned because you feared what we could do. And now you remember." And the signal cut. A second later, another signal appeared. Then a third, a fourth, across dozens of systems. Pirate space, abandoned colonies, forgotten stations, unmanned probes, all relaying a fractured version of Ren's final broadcast. Each one slightly different, each one deliberate. The ghosts of Delve Prime had learned how to haunt the stars. Back on Earth, the Global Defense Council sat in stunned silence. Reports poured in, mercenary guilds disbanded overnight. Smugglers vacated entire systems flagged as human contaminated. Military convoys rerouted at the mere whisper of a red signal ping. And the headlines told the story Earth's governments refused to say out loud. The most dangerous weapon in the galaxy is now memory. An admiral slammed his fist against the table. "We told them to contain it. We gave them limits." "They were contained," another official replied grimly. "They were precise, that's the problem." No one spoke after that, because the truth had grown too large to ignore. The humans hadn't returned to Earth. They weren't taking orders. They weren't coming home. Because Earth was never what they were fighting for. Some said Silas Ren was still alive, drifting somewhere between systems on an old stealth Corvette. A specter with a pulse. Others claimed he was gone, that his mind had burned away in the Delve collapse, but his voice lived on, replicated by an AI woven into black box drones, seeded across space. Kira, they said, had become myth. In the ruins of ancient battlefields, soldiers found Earth sigils etched into steel and stone, always the same symbol, an upward-pointing arrow through a shattered circle. The old human mark for home. No one knew what it meant, but they feared it, because they feared her. Years passed, the galaxy tried to heal. But some wounds don't close. They scar, they fester, and in the shadow of Delve Prime, the Accord made one final, desperate decision. They would never speak of it again. The records were sealed, the footage deleted, the entire war scrubbed from public archives, rewritten as a regional collapse, a failure of interstellar diplomacy. Nothing more. But even buried history leaves echoes. In bars on the rim, bounty hunters still tell stories of a dark planet that eats armies. On prison transports, inmates whisper about red ping zones where voices drift through radio static. In quiet corridors of military academies, cadets pass around old data chips with a corrupted file labeled Ren Last Transmission Wave. Those who hear it never forget it. Some say it drives them mad, others just enlist. 50 years later, a cargo hauler crash-landed on the fringes of a forgotten system. Its distress beacon flared for 6 hours before dying. A rescue team arrived 12 hours later. The docking bay was torn open, scorched by internal blast patterns. Most of the crew were missing. Of the 5-man team that entered, only one came back. He walked out covered in blood that wasn't his. Eyes wide, voice distant. He just kept repeating the same phrase. "They're still out there, waiting." In dark corners of the galaxy among smugglers and deserters, a saying took root. You don't ban humans from the battlefield because they're dangerous. You ban them because once they remember what they are, you can't make them forget. Silas Ren's last message continued to drift across space, picked up by abandoned probes, reflected off the dead surfaces of forgotten moons, echoed through the long corridors of derelict stations. No encryption, no authentication, just truth. You feared what we could do, and now you remember. And in that memory, a lesson burned itself into the bones of the stars. Do not wake the ghost of Earth, because the next time they come, they won't be soldiers. They won't be troops. They'll be something worse. They'll be war wearing a human face.